Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today I am finally talking about Faithbreaker and, as a result, the entirety of the Fallen God series, all by Hannah Kaner. Now for those of you who don't know, this is a book review. It's been a while since I did one of those, but I do love to talk about books because they are wonderful. Seriously kids, go to your local library, read. There's so many fun stories to be found in books that don't get turned into movies or games and stuff like that because books have a much lower overhead when it comes to the amount of people needed to make them. You only need one good writer and you can make an excellent book series. But with the pitch for reading out the way, let's get into what this is all about. Now, for those of you who don't know, I have done previous reviews on the Fallen God series before, starting with God Killer and then later Sunbringer. These books follow a fantasy world where belief begets gods. In particular, the book focuses on the relation of a world where humans can ask favors of gods and the gods' perspective on that and how their belief can slowly corrupt them, how absolute power can corrupt either human or god, and just in general has a very interesting fantasy setting with a lot of interesting ideas and especially characters. Now, I'm kind of going to make this a review of Fallen Gods as a whole, even though I've done previous reviews on Sunbringer and God Killer in the past. You can check out those reviews, although they are older, and I think I've improved my video making experience a lot over the years. Still, I think Sunbringer should be fine to watch. Regardless, these books are pretty good. I wouldn't say they're like the best thing I've ever read or anything like that, but they're definitely up there for me with fantasy. Which is really impressive because the author, Hannah Kaner, has literally only written this. This is the first thing she ever wrote was God Killer, then she wrote Sunbringer, and then she wrote Faithbreaker, and that's literally it. So very impressive to her, and kudos, seriously. Amazing job for your first series. Fantastic. Now, the main basic plot of the books is as follows. There was this kingdom that went to war with the gods after their gods kind of went on a rampage. Some of the gods sided with them, but in the end, after a bloody war, the kingdom of Midren banned the worship of gods. However, there's stewing rebellion over that, the gods don't like it, and the lost city was essentially barricaded away like an ugly wound. The first book had us going to that city to look into the origin of Inara. She was a young girl from a noble family who had been hidden away her life. She's bonded to a small god of white lies and is eventually, over the course of Sunbringer, revealed to be a demigod. Sorry for the spoiler. It's not like a major plot twist, I don't think. You can kind of guess at it very early on. But I do want to warn that there are other spoilers for God Killer and Sunbringer. I will try and hold back on spoilers for Faithbreaker specifically, though, until a later part of the review. Anyway, she was accompanied by a God Killer named Kissin. She kills gods using an anti-god metal, and as a result, she's basically called in whenever a god starts getting out of hand. Because the main idea in the God Killer series is the gods aren't inherently evil, but they tend towards certain patterns. You'll have a small god worshipped for a niche capacity who will grow more powerful and more important, and as they do so, the demands they make of people will grow from small favors or trinkets and love to I want human sacrifice. Because in this world, the offering of things is what gives gods power. It's not necessarily what you give them, it's the value of what you give them. And that's actually a big thing. It's like things are only as valuable as people want them to be for God. So, for example, to one person, giving up a locket they have that's the last memory of their, family, that their whole family's dead and this is the last thing they own is an heirloom, is super valuable to a god. If a god is offered that, they'll do anything that a human wants. But if another person who still has their family offers an heirloom locket, and it's kind of just this thing they got from their parents, and yeah, they like it, but they offer it to the god because they need to save somebody, the god might be like, yeah, that's not enough, offer me a blood sacrifice. Because a lot of powerful gods want more for what they're given. And one of the interesting things about the Fallen God series is it doesn't necessarily treat gods as inherently evil. In the beginning, it can seem that way. One of the first things that happens in the first book is that Kissin kills a water god who has started demanding they offer like human or animal sacrifices to it so it won't flood their town. Originally, they offered it like seashells or something like that. However, Kissin is very set in her ways. She's a great character, fantastic. She has like a prosthetic leg or anything. It's really cool. She's a really well-written character with her own backstory about her dad saved her life by offering his life to an ocean god who loved him. And Kissin has rejected the favor by saving herself. And at the end of the first book, she ends up actually redeeming the favor so that she can kill another god who is threatening Inara and Skedi. That's the god of white lies. And it's a great arc. First book was amazing. I loved Kissin. And she didn't show up enough in Sunbringer. She showed up a bit. She even got to see that water god again, which was really cool, and I liked their whole dynamic. And you see them both again in this book, too. She's actually a much more major player in this book, in my opinion. But yeah, it's really interesting, because in the first book, they really did show the cruelty of gods, specifically the cruelty of gods. In the second book, they showed the cruelty of men, and even the king has like abandoned his morals or principles and used a bonding kind of ritual thing with a god of hearth called Hestra, and he's essentially trying to become like a god king, and it's all about how the gods don't necessarily hate humans or aren't necessarily evil, and stamping them out isn't exactly right either, because they're a natural part of humanity and their reaction to the world. In particular, one of the things that over the course of the series Kissen has to deal with is Skedi, because Skedi is this god of white lies who's bonded to Inara, and over the course of his years, he's essentially got reborn. When a god gets killed, if they have enough worship, they come back, but they're not the same person, so Skedi has no memories of his previous life. And we find out more about it, especially in this one. However, one of the main things with Skedi is that providing Kissen as well with a new worldview, because Kissen had always believed that gods could not change. They were defined by their humanity's belief and worship of them that inevitably turned them corrupt. There were good gods, gods who protected humanity, but the best gods, in her opinion, were the ones who tried to stay away from major worship and relied on minor stuff to get by and didn't try to push themselves or get larger, didn't expand. And even then, she was distrustful of them inherently, because she believed they couldn't change. Like, that was one of her main beliefs, is that gods don't change. Inevitably, when they get enough worship, they start getting corrupt and they start asking for people's lives. It's just a fact of life to her. And Skedi really does challenge that belief, because Skedi does have his issues, especially in the first book with his lies, but he grows, he changes, he gets better, he becomes a better person, a better god. And especially when you reach the point in the story where he does start getting worship and does start getting shrines, because the people around him see that he's helping people, and others outside the group start to worship him, and he can maybe leave Inara or go there. He refuses. He gives up his main goal from the first book of having a nice shrine, a nice life, a good worship, and he stays with those he cares for because he wants to protect them. And this helps to show Kissen that gods can change too, that beliefs can change, and that it's not all set in stone. It's a very, very good arc for both the characters. I loved it. We did learn in the second book that he was essentially a secondary god who traveled with the god of safe havens and would whisper white lies to travelers. You know, it's going to be okay, the storm isn't that bad, you're all going to be safe, to comfort them on their travels. And he was essentially sheltered in that god's shrine who had enough worship. And Inara is that god's demigod child, so he was able to bond to her and sustain himself. And Inara, as a demigod, is not, like, powerful in the sense she has magic. She's powerful in the sense that she can connect with gods and see their emotions and feel things the way they do, but her blood is also extremely potent. If she gives a piece of herself, a god can get a massive boost of power. And in the second book, she moves into that. She started offering pieces of herself to solve issues, and now it's getting to the point where other people have to stop her because she's trying to offer too much. She's willing to even sacrifice her own life, even though everyone in the story is basically doing what they're doing to keep her alive. Her mother has come back from the dead in the second book and is trying to keep her alive. Kissen has been trying to keep her alive since she found her, basically. You know, even the knight, Ilogast, is trying to keep her alive, and her sacrificing herself is not the answer, even though it kind of was in the second book. It's going too far, and there's a point about how older generations shouldn't martyr the younger ones and sacrifice the younger ones for their goals. It's actually one of the main differences between the group, between them and the cult of Seth, a fire god who was killed in the first book, but immediately resurrected as this god of desolation and war. And she's even offered children as sacrifices, and her cultists conscript children into their army. And again, that's a big contrast between the main group wanting to send her away from the fighting and the cultists driving them members into it. So yeah, the book is really good. I did think what they did with Illigast and King Aaron was kind of meh. I get it's supposed to be like you can't choose who you love, but you can choose how you deal with it. I get that we weren't supposed to like Aaron, and that's intentional, but we were supposed to be like, okay, maybe Illigast still does. The problem is he offered Illigast as a blood sacrifice at the end of the first book, and it's only thanks to Kissen that he wasn't, like, offered his life just so Aaron could continue living. This is, again, during the same period of time when Aaron had outlawed all god worship, and so he was being an extra big hypocrite. I think that he's kind of just an irredeemable asshole. I do like how the story eventually narratively punished him, but I will save that for later because that's going to be for the spoiler talk. Anyway, moving on from there, I do kind of want to get into spoilery territory, so there's a timestamp on screen. Go to that point if you want to hear my final thoughts on the story. From here on till then, we've got spoilers. So, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's get into this. Now, the final book of the God Killer series is a lot. There's a lot going on. We've got Haseth reborn, now that Bridite, the anti-god metal, doesn't work on her, which I thought was a nice touch. We even got to see the god who originally created Bridite, and he's kind of disillusioned with humanity. See, the thing I want to focus on, though, is not all of that. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there with the Seth's cult, and Aaron's own worshippers, and all that. And yeah, I do like that Aaron, the God King, essentially got his worship banned, just like he had done to a bunch of other gods. Essentially, after Aaron dies near the end, there's a little epilogue, and they talk about how his worship is being outlawed because they don't want the man to rise again. He got everything he wanted in life, except near his death, where he finally fucked up because one of his own worshippers thought, hey, we should kill him so he can rise from the ashes as a powerful god, even though he was almost able to restrain his Seth and would have won everything he wanted in life. His own worshippers fucked it up for him because they misunderstood him because of the way he presented himself, which was great. Don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on what they did with Yusuf. This was Inara's parent, the god who was with her mother, and used to be Skedi's essentially like boss. They kind of made him a petulant child, but they did it in an interesting way. See, one of the things that's always been interesting is that way that, immortality is tends to be presented in media. An immortal character will always watch those they love die without them, and they'll have to see them again as a stranger or whatever, if reincarnation is a thing. This one kind of flips the script. See, Yusuf was killed in the old battles of Midran. Skedi barely survived and clung to Inara after her birth, so he got to kind of live it, but most of his memories are gone, and he barely gets a few of them back over the course of the books. He's basically a whole new god. However, so is Yusuf. Yusuf was reborn because his worship was extremely big. One of the big things that started the God War was that new gods of fortune and trade were starting to push out the gods of, like, the forest and the hunt and fertility. They were starting to get pushed aside in favor of commerce and money, which is a good way to show how the world is developed over time, and I can imagine something like that happening in a natural progression of an economic system from a more medieval or city-state-based affair to kingdoms to then mercantile empires, which is a whole other topic in and of itself, and it's mostly a background feature of these books. I could totally see a whole other series being said about that in this world. However, with Yusuf, it was kind of interesting, because he was a god of safe havens. He fit into both the old and the new worlds. In the new world, he guarded merchant ships and the people who were on them from storms. In the old world, he guarded people on long treks through the forest to the next piece of civilization. He came back as an asshole. He's always described as one of the more kind and patient gods, the ones who understood humans and protected us during the God Rampage. Even Inara's mother, who was like, look, he was like several hundred years old, and I have mixed feelings about the fact that we got together. Even she is kind of like, I did kind of love him, though, and he was very kind. And everyone describes him that way. But when we find him again, he's this, like, newborn child god. Like, an actual, like, child. He's described that way, very petulant, very rash and emotional. And he only knows things about himself that his priests have told him. He's essentially a version of Yusuf that has only ever seen his success, his wonders, and the way people sing his praises. He's not an old god who rose from people's desperate pleas, who had sympathy for humanity. He's a new god born of the mercantile empire where everything's more transactional, where they give me worship because I protect them. Not I protect them for their worship, but I also feel for them. Which was, again, one of Yusuf's divine traits. And so when you strip away all of the growth and development that led to those stories that his priest idolized, all that you're left with is a petulant child who's gotten everything he wanted in life. And when he meets Inara, it's one of the most shocking moments for me, because he just doesn't give a shit about her. Like, clearly maybe Yusuf used to care for her and her mother, but he clearly doesn't give a shit about Inara now. In this new version of him, barely cared about Skedi. Like, he got all hyped up when he heard about Skedi again, and then he grew disinterested in, like, a few minutes. And even when he has to make a deal with Inara to save her mother, he gives, like, zero shits about the woman he apparently had a child with in a previous life, because he's like, oh, that's old Yusuf, I don't care about that anymore. It was brutal for Inara, though, who had heard all these stories about the previous version of Yusuf being so kind and understanding and loving, and how he died protecting humans during the siege at Blin Raiden. All of that just comes crashing down. Anyway, he has to make a deal with him. It's like one of those things that, like, bitter in her chest. I do like how that played out, though. In the epilogue, she had to build a shrine that was larger than the one where she met him. And she built one that was exactly 1 inch larger. They made exactly sure, and they locked it behind a gate, and no one's allowed to go in. Just beautiful. I love that. Very petty. I'm on board. Finally, moving on to the conclusion. Yes, I think the Fallen God series is a great work of fantasy. It's a fantastic series. I think God Killer is probably the strongest one. Sunbringer has some good moments, and this last one has some good moments. There are some rougher moments in this one. I think God Killer, the first book, is still the best overall book. It has the tightest plot. The group is all together, and I like how the three main characters bounce off each other. The main issue I have with this one is that it is, like the previous book, a book that separates its main cast. Kissen, Inara, and Elogast, the knight, the god killer, and the noblewoman, who their god of white lies, Skedi. Those four characters are all together in the first book for basically the whole thing, even if they're trying to keep Skedi secret or whatever. And in that book, we got to see them play off each other really well. And there is that in this book. There are plenty of moments in this book where they're playing off each other, which is an improvement over Sunbringer. Unlike in Sunbringer, in Faithbreaker, we actually just see the characters interacting with each other. They split up multiple times, but they do eventually, in the end, reunite. And they get to have that kind of back and forth between them and their good dynamic, which is always great. Oh, right, I should probably warn you, there are at least 2 different sex scenes in this book. Not sure if that's a warning for you or if you don't want that, but do be aware that is a thing in this book. So if you don't like that, I can understand it. There's your warning. You can just skip past them, though. They're not, like, a plot essential. Although Kiss and Inara's mother do fuck, so there's that. Honestly, I'm not even into romance, and I saw that coming a mile away. I'd like to also give a special extra thanks to someone on Twitter. So, it was a pain in the ass to find any art for this series at all. There were very few fan art pieces, and I want to spotlight one person in particular, at Merc Draws. I'm going to put his link in the description. I got these 3 line arts from him, and I colored them in so they now look like this. And that was really helpful for the making of this video, so I just wanted to give him an extra special shout out. Thank you, Merc. Great work. Still, I think the series is really good, and it's not something I hear talked about a lot. Hannah Kaner, it's her first book, so she doesn't have a huge audience, but it really is worth giving a try, and if you like fantasy or you like the whole belief begets gods thing, this is definitely a series you should check out. Faithbreaker is an excellent book. God Killer is an excellent book. Even Sunbringer, despite all the issues I have with it, and the way it times drags in the middle, still great books with some cool ideas. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Hannah Kaner does in the future. So, yeah, like it. Moving on now to the out card. So, this was a long review. Sorry about that. I basically had to retro review the whole series with this one because it's kind of the finale, and it's been a while since I first reviewed God Killer. In addition, I am currently streaming on 7:30 Central Standard Time. I'm currently both streaming Doom: The Dark Ages and also Expedition 33, Clair Obscura Expedition 33 to be precise. Both really good games. I'm really loving Expedition 33 though. Seriously, I'm going to have a review of that in the future because I need to talk about it. In addition to that, if you didn't know, I have a Discord channel. You can go there and just like ask me questions. I have a whole little forum section where you can ask me to stream or review stuff or just tell me about cool things you like. I'm always open to finding new things. I do love talking to you guys. I post there pretty regularly with new drawings, animations I'm working on. I'm starting to get into animating. Very basic stuff at the moment, but we're moving. I also just post updates on things, so if you want to ask me a question and you want to keep up to date, go down the link below in the description. There should be a link to my Discord channel. Join up. We're always happy to see it. There are a few other people on there at the moment, and I would love to see more people. Seriously, it'll be a lot of fun. Finally, we have the out card. There should be a subscribe or click on it, go to my channel, subscribe, and finally there's a video YouTube recommends. Click on that, watch another of my stuff. It would really mean a lot. Seriously, I have seen a bunch of new people coming around. I've even seen a few other people stopping by stream every once in a while. I would love to see you guys there or just watching more of my videos. It really does help. So, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye.